Hello, Christ is risen. Peace, health, and goodness to all. We begin with the Kursk-Sumy direction. The Russian army has established full control over Oleshnya. The armed forces of Ukraine, AFU, were practically transferring reserves daily to the area of the Oleshnya hamlet, trying to halt the advance of Russian troops from the north. After fierce fighting, Russian units achieved success. Only a small border area, the settlement of Gornyal, remains temporarily under AFU control. However, by the time this report is released, the situation there may also be resolved. On the border with the Belgorod region, the AFU continues attempts to breach the border. Media reports indicate the neutralization of 2 more Ukrainian foot assault groups heading toward the border, as well as sabotage units in the Miropolsk area. In Pavlivka and the surrounding forests, clearing operations continue. The Russian armed forces fully control Demidovka, but small groups of AFU assault troops periodically attempt to infiltrate from the forest. Additionally, artillery and drone crews continue operations in Sumy oblast. In the Sumy region, the Russian army is advancing on multiple fronts. Reports indicate fighting on the outskirts of the village of Vodolaki, as well as Russian troops advancing toward Belgorod. Near Basovka and Lochnya, the AFU constantly counterattacks, desperately trying to prevent the loss of Yunakovka, located just beyond Lochnya. Reports suggest significant AFU losses in this sector. Sumy stated that the evening power outage in the region was caused by Russian strikes, a notable development as the 30-day moratorium on mutual attacks on energy infrastructure has expired. Next, the Novopavlivka direction. Russian forces are pushing north toward Komar from Otradnoye and Bogatyr. Fighting has been reported north of Shevchenko. Battles continue along the Fedorovka line, but no major changes have occurred. The Russian army is approaching the outskirts of Otradnoye. Assault troops have also attempted to enter Bogatyr. Movement is constant. This advance appears to have become possible after the AFU regrouped and redirected some reserves to hold the Kotliarovka-Troitskaya line. According to operational data, assault units are reaching the outskirts of Orekhovo, which borders the Dnipropetrovsk oblast. From the Pokrovsk front, south of the city, interesting news has arrived. Russian forces broke into Zverevo and now control at least half of the village. Additionally, there is significant Russian advancement from Kotlina along the road to Pokrovsk. Heavy fighting also continues in the ruins of Peshani, where Ukrainian forces periodically make unsuccessful small group sorties. The Russian Defense Ministry reported that the village of Shevchenko, south of Pokrovsk, is coming under Russian control. On the eastern flank, after securing Yelizavetivka, Russian troops entered Mirolyubivka and are engaged in fierce fighting there. South of Malinivka, battles are underway for AFU strongholds. Toretsk direction. On the western flank, the Russian Defense Ministry confirmed control over Valentinivka. Russian units are also advancing in Suka-Balka, with up to half the village under Russian control. Full control will allow them to push toward Romanivka and align this flank with Leonidivka, eventually bypassing Shcherbinivka from the west. From Kalinov, Russian forces are advancing toward Stara Mykolaievka. North of Toretsk, Russian troops are moving along the road to Dilievka. Krasnoliman direction. Fighting continues for Novoye, where Russian forces have made gains in the eastern part. On the same sector, Russian troops are advancing toward Redkodub. From Makiivka, successful attacks have been reported on Petrovsk. Kupiansk front. The AFU has assembled a large force for a counterattack in the Kondrashivka-Mala Shapkivka area. The AFU is also trying to maintain control over the road to Veliki Burluk. Meanwhile, Russian aerospace forces are conducting airstrikes directly on AFU positions in Kupiansk. North of Kupiansk, on the right bank of the Oskil River, Russian forces are advancing from Kalinove toward Mala Shapkivka. This appears to be an effort to cut off the AFU garrison in Kupiansk from the north and disrupt its supply routes. Kharkiv direction, Vovchansk, Liptsi, Slatin, Zolochiv. Positional battles continue. Russian forces are actively using drones, long-range artillery, and flamethrower systems. Strikes have been carried out on Kharkiv and Izium. A combined strike with Geran, Shahed drones, and an Iskander missile neutralized a key AFU logistics facility near Kharkiv. The target was Effect LLC, a repurposed enterprise supporting the Ukrainian army, as reported by retired Colonel Hennady Alakin. It provided communications equipment for AFU units. 3 production buildings housing communication modules were destroyed. Izium. For the first time in a long while, the city was hit with a very powerful strike. Recreation bases and a cottage compound, where a base of foreign mercenaries was located, as well as an industrial zone, were hit. A prolonged secondary detonation was heard. A large ammunition depot was destroyed. An interesting detail about Kharkiv: local authorities were the first to respond to Zelensky's call to recreate resistance centers, in other words, to mobilize civilians for digging trenches around Kharkiv. According to Gennady Alekin, this is happening near the Kharkiv Ring Road, between Cherkony and Derhachi, along the roads leading to Liptsy, Slatin and Zolochiv. On the Zaporizhzhia front, positional battles continue along the Lobkova-Shcherbaki line, but there is Russian advancement northward near Mali-Shcherbaki. Following yesterday's breakthrough, Russian forces, despite losses, managed to gain a foothold on the eastern outskirts of Mala Tokmachka. Essentially, this is a suburb of Orikhiv, stretching almost 10 kilometers long. Capturing these new positions will allow them to advance toward this logistical hub. The US reportedly informed participants of the Paris meeting that they had developed a ceasefire monitoring plan for Ukraine in case a truce is reached. Interestingly, this plan was not tested for monitoring the moratorium on strikes against energy infrastructure. Trump expressed dissatisfaction that negotiations had reached a dead end. This comes just days before Secretary of State Rubio's statement about the US being ready to abandon its mediator role between Russia and Ukraine. If the US withdraws from the settlement process, Ukraine will lose access to intelligence and the remnants of American aid, approved under Biden and still trickling into Kyiv. The New York Times calls the scenario of US withdrawal a gift to Putin and a possible attempt to shift the war burden onto Europe. Meanwhile, European officials say they haven't even received assurances about continued intelligence sharing on Ukraine. Ukraine risks a complete fallout with China. Another dangerous episode: Zelensky's official statement accusing China of supplying aid to Russia, including gunpowder and artillery. It's important to note that this is not a leak, but a direct statement by the head of state, citing SBU intelligence. China, in response, said it has never supplied weapons to either side of the Ukrainian conflict. Zelensky's latest move appears to be a last-ditch effort to sway the US to his side by painting China as an enemy. However, this could backfire. Beijing has so far remained neutral, and such accusations may provoke a sharp response, even a severance of relations. Zelensky will have a hard time swallowing that. The Washington Post writes that Witkow's peace plan contains many concessions to Moscow, but no security guarantees for Ukraine. On Thursday, Witkow presented Ukrainian and European leaders with a negotiation framework developed during his meeting with Putin. However, it included so many concessions to Moscow on security issues that Ukrainian and European officials rejected it, sources say. The article states that Zelensky will struggle to accept Witkow's current proposal. A major obstacle is that the plan appears to lack US-backed security guarantees. Instead, Ukraine would be left to rely on European support, likely without US backing. Sources say Moscow is unwilling to compromise on key demands, including security dominance. History teaches only one thing, that it teaches nothing. And generally, if you don't learn history's lessons, history will repeat them and punish those who skipped class. I think you've heard these phrases in different variations. Europe proves this regularly, constantly picking fights with Russia and getting hit hard. We're no longer surprised. They don't study history, and for obvious reasons. The West has a problem with history. Simply put, they can't learn from it because they keep ending up as losers while we emerge as winners. Unpleasant, but true. What's doubly frustrating is that this is a vicious cycle. Each new generation tries to avenge their grandparents only to get beaten again. They went for wool but came back shorn. Take Germany, for example, still restless. Germany has excluded Russia and Belarus from events marking the 80th anniversary of World War II's end, following a recommendation from its foreign ministry. the Bundestag decided not to invite diplomats from Russia and Belarus to memorial events, as the German Foreign Office feared Moscow might use them for propaganda, drawing parallels between World War II and the current conflict. Oh, sure. They didn't invite the liberators of Auschwitz either, or the Jews for that matter. A dark joke, really. The 80th anniversary of Auschwitz's liberation was celebrated only by the organizers. Those who get it, get it. Now, under Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock's recommendation, they're taking this 360-degree nosedive. In short, Germany is taking huge risks and dragging the entire EU with it. For the first time since 1945, Europe has positioned itself against not just Russia, but also the US. The last time a collective Europe, united under a German leader, opposed both Moscow and Washington simultaneously was in 1945. That didn't end well for them.